Tiger King aired on Netflix on March 20th, 2020. The journey to expose big cat owners in the United States began when directors Eric and Rebecca Good were visiting an animal dealer in South Florida. The couple noticed that a snow leopard had been left in the back of a hot van, and this sparked their need to look deeper into the industry. While the docuseries had good intentions, it quickly became a train wreck that no one could walk away from. Aside from the colorful life of Joe Exotic, the show dove into accusations of murder and talking of hiring a hitman to eliminate Exotic's rival, Carol Baskin. With only 7 episodes, a lot of information never made it to the series, and here are 5 of those stories. Number 5. Joe was born in Kansas and grew up working on the family farm. He spent 14 years there before his father moved the family to a ranch in Wyoming, before settling into a spacious 8-bedroom home in Pilot Point, Texas. After graduating high school in 1982, Joe became a police officer in the nearby town of Eastvale, Texas. Just 20 miles north of Dallas, Eastvale had a population of just over 600 people. The town was supposed to be a dream community, a nice escape from the busy streets of Dallas, but soon after its founding in the mid-70s, it became a nightmare. The streets were so riddled with potholes that school buses couldn't travel down them, and people who did drive were forced to weave around the gigantic holes. At one point, the post office sent residents a notice informing them that they'd no longer be able to operate if something wasn't done about the roads. If that wasn't enough, the town had a water shortage due to poorly installed water pipes, and they couldn't afford to replace them. Needless to say, Eastvale wasn't exactly a place to be desired. Joe felt that he found acceptance with his colleagues in Eastvale and was quickly promoted to chief of police. The department only had a few officers, and there weren't a lot of serious crimes. He enjoyed his career at the time, and because he had not yet come to terms with his sexuality and his colleagues looked up to him, he was comfortable. It wasn't long, however, before one of Joe's siblings allegedly told their father that Joe was interested in men. This revelation caused his father to become so disgusted and upset that he made Joe shake his hand and promised to not attend his funeral when he passed. Even though the two had never had a close relationship, this devastated Joe. Not long after the confrontation, Joe was approaching a bridge in his patrol vehicle when he slammed into a concrete barrier. The crash was nearly fatal and allegedly left Joe with serious injuries that required months of physical therapy. There are conflicting reports about the cause of the crash. Some sources say that Joe became so depressed after his father expressed his disapproval and disdain that he tried to take his own life. Joe himself claimed at one point that it was an accident that occurred while he was involved in a drug bust, but either way, Joe never returned to work at the police department. Number 4. Joe later found work as a security guard at the Roundup Saloon where he met Brian Ryan. The two formed a relationship and moved to Arlington together, where Joe started working at a pet store called Pet Safari. In 1986, Joe, along with Brian and Joe's brother, Gerald, bought Pet Safari and began building their business. They focused on selling reptiles, birds, and fish, and later added armadillos and possums. Gerald was creative and determined to find ways to help the business thrive. He would dumpster dive behind furniture and carpet stores, collecting their scraps and building dog houses and cat playhouses to sell at Pet Safari. In 1993, the business was targeted by a thief who broke in and stole 6 pythons and a boa constrictor. Joe was so rattled by the crime that he slept in his shop with guns just in case the burglar would return. A few weeks later, an 18-year-old was arrested for the crime and 3 of the snakes were returned. One of them ended up dying soon after, and Joe stated that the other 2 showed signs of neglect and abuse. In 1997, Joe's world was turned completely upside down when his brother Gerald was killed by a drunk driver just outside of Dallas. The two had a very close relationship and bonded over their mutual love for animals. As children, they watched animal documentaries together and envisioned what life would be like to live freely with the animals. Joe was heartbroken and sold the pet store. Allegedly using some of the money awarded to his family in Gerald's death, Joe purchased 16 acres of land and opened the Gerald Wayne Exotic Animal Memorial Park. On the 2nd anniversary of his brother's passing, Joe opened the park to the public. Number 3. In 1999, when the memorial park was still under construction, Joe received a call about a flock of emaciated emus in Red Oak, Texas. During the 1990s, emus were bred for their meat. It was lower in cholesterol than beef, and ranchers thought that the birds would eventually replace cows as a primary source of meat. When the demand for emu meat wasn't high enough as ranchers had expected, many of the birds were left to starve due to the high expense of feeding them. Joe set off with rescue volunteers, members of the local FFA, and police officers to visit the ranch in an effort to help over 100 starving birds. Lee claimed that the flock cost him roughly $4,000 a month to feed, and with them being virtually useless and not turning over any profit, they were fed sparingly in an attempt to make the feed last. Instead of feeding the emus every day, Lee allegedly said that he fed them only once a week. This left them in a horrible state due to starvation. Many of them were supposedly too weak to stand on their own, and their overall health was rapidly declining. Joe originally planned to rescue the birds and take them back to his zoo, but the rescue attempt turned disastrous. In the process of trying to capture the birds, 15 of them died from the stress and being trampled to death by other birds trying to evade them. To spare some of the weaker emus the same fate, Joe allegedly took it upon himself to shoot 6 of them with a shotgun. Most of the flock was saved, but the controversy of the rescue nearly ruined Joe's reputation when a video of the incident was released to local reporters. Joe was never indicted for any of the charges after the situation was investigated. Another rancher from Texas ended up taking the flock in with the promise of nursing them back to health and finding them proper homes. Number 2. In the series, it's revealed that Joe's TV studio burned to the ground in a suspicious fire. The fire not only affected his studio, but the adjacent building, which housed 7 alligators and 1 crocodile. The animal enclosure was engulfed in flames, burning them alive, according to Joe's former partner, John Finley. The animals were rescued from Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch following its closure in 2005 by one of the zoo's previous managers. This has been confirmed by Joe, who stated that everything else could be replaced, but the animals once owned by the pop star could not. While representatives of Jackson's estate cannot confirm if the animals were indeed taken from Neverland, the connection was headline news when the arson was originally reported in 2015. The Oklahoman covered the fire in an article published on April 1, 2015, and Joe was quoted as saying, "When they closed down Neverland Ranch and auctioned off his property, they asked us to come get all the reptiles and alligators and other stuff." He also said he aided in relocating some giraffes off the property. The Los Angeles Times also published an article in 2015 detailing the loss of the pop star's former pets. Number 1. Reporter Robert Moore shadowed Joe for an in-depth investigative piece not long after the fire. He set out over the course of a week to detail the life of the big cat lover and later created the podcast Joe Exotic Tiger King. At the time, Joe claimed that he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, as well as bone marrow cancer. Joe allegedly took to Facebook to garner sympathy from fans and asked for donations to help pay for his treatments. He reported later that he had surgery to remove the cancer that led to sepsis, damaging his liver and kidneys. None of these claims seemed to be true. However, it was discovered that Joe was suffering from an inflamed prostate and dehydration when he was hospitalized. Though his cancer diagnosis, if it does turn out to be true, is between him and his doctors, many people raised questions due to the social media posts. Particularly the posts that he made for monetary donations to help with the expenses. People naturally wanted to make sure that they were donating to someone who was truly in need, and Joe couldn't seem to come up with anything to validate his claims. This left a lot of people feeling like they were scammed and that the cancer never even existed. While having dinner one night with a dozen friends, including Moore, Joe claimed that his doctor would probably give him just 2 months to live. He went on to say that if he was going to die anyway, he was going to take Carol Baskin with him. He detailed how he would mutilate her body and finally put an end to the long-time feud. Moore says that this wasn't the only time that Joe mentioned killing Baskin. He says that on more than one occasion, Joe would express his desire to kill his rival in such an over-the-top way that most people thought he was joking. According to Moore, Joe told him, "I have a weapon set aside. I never used to dream about seeing someone's brains on a wall until now." Given the circumstances leading to his recent arrest, there may have been some truth to his morbid stories. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.